I thank my good colleague from Maryland, Mr. Raskin. It's been such a pleasure since coming to Congress, and it seems difficult to believe that it's only been almost 3 months, but it's been such a pleasure to co-lead this special order hour with you and to really bring to the public all of the issues that we feel are so important in the Progressive Caucus. Issues that have ranged from the issue we're talking about now with this Supreme Court nomination to issues around health care, immigration, the Muslim ban, and many others. And I think that the vision that we are trying to make sure people understand for our caucus, for the Progressive Caucus, and certainly for Democrats, is a vision of inclusion, a vision that respects the rights of everybody, regardless of what gender you are, regardless of what race or religion you might be. And this moment is, in fact, very important. Tomorrow, Senate Republicans will attempt to push through President Trump's Supreme Court nominee, Neil Gorsuch, and I stand with my colleague, Mr. Raskin, and with our other Democratic colleagues in the Senate who are opposing this nomination because I truly believe that confirming Neil Gorsuch to this position would be a devastating backslide for numerous communities, and I want to go through some of the communities that would be affected and how. Women, people of color, people living with disabilities, and members of the LGBTQ community will have to wonder if the conservative majority on the Supreme Court is going to systematically remove their protections and strip them of their rights. And unfortunately, Neil Gorsuch, though an accomplished justice in his own right, does have a track record of doing that throughout his judicial career. And so this isn't as simple as saying, well, you blocked our nominee, so therefore we're going to block your nominee. No, this is about the issues and the refusal that he has had to answer some of the questions before the committee. Now, I did want to reflect briefly on the fact that yesterday was Equal Pay Day, and 94 days into the year, Equal Pay Day symbolizes the amount of extra time that it takes for a woman to earn the same amount as a man. So we've got to work, and I see the heads nodding up there. We've got to work extra hard for an additional 3 months and some days in order to earn the same wages as a man. And when you break it down by race, the gap widens even further. Black women working full-time year-round only earn 63 cents to the dollar. For them, Equal Pay Day comes on July 31st. Latina women earn a mere 54 cents, which means that their Equal Pay Day, get this, is November 2nd. And over a lifetime, the financial losses that women face due to this gap are immense. And on average, a 20-year-old woman will lose $418,000 over the course of her 40-year career. For black women, they will lose $840,000, and Latinas will lose more than $1 million. Now, why do I bring this up in the context of Judge Gorsuch? Because I believe that as we mark Equal Pay Day, that we need to know that we will have a Supreme Court justice who will, in fact, crack down on the gender pay gap and enforce the law. But unfortunately, Judge Gorsuch has a history of prioritizing big business over people. In fact, he has ruled in favor of employers in 2/3 of the employment and labor disputes that have been brought before him on the basis of discrimination. And let's be clear that the Equal Pay Day and the situation that women face is about discrimination. Gorsuch ruled against an African-American man who claimed that he was fired because of racial discrimination in Johnson v. Oklahoma Department of Transportation. In Poindexter v. Board of County Commissioners of the County of Sequoia, he ruled against a man who argued that he was demoted because of his political views. His opinion in v. UPS was particularly troubling. The court ruled in favor of a female employee who had been discriminated against based on sex. Judge Gorsuch, though, wrote a dissenting opinion despite the fact that the woman's male colleagues testified that she was required to attend counseling sessions while they were not, even though she was outperforming them. The court ruled in her favor, but again, Judge Gorsuch, the President Trump's nominee to the Supreme Court of the United States of America, went out of his way to undermine her. Perhaps the clearest example of Gorsuch's affinity for big business was his ruling in the Hobby Lobby case, which many people across the country may know about. He ruled that private corporations should enjoy the same constitutional protections as people. Not only are people being told that the money of corporations represents protected speech, but women across this country are being told that they cannot make, that those corporations can make decisions about women's health care and their rights to make decisions about their own body. This case sent a clear signal that Judge Gorsuch is no friend of women's reproductive rights. It isn't a surprise, frankly, that this president chose him, because he does fit right into this administration's all-out assault that we have seen since the beginning of this Congress on women's rights to make decisions about their bodies and their health care. Judge Gorsuch wrote a concurring opinion arguing that the Affordable Care Act forced employers to violate their religious beliefs by providing birth control. This is our right to choose whether and when we want to have families. But rather than coming to the conclusion that corporations should be required to allow women to make our own decisions, Judge Gorsuch made it very clear that he stands with big business and against women's rights. His appointment is a deep threat to something that I have appreciated my whole life and women before me have fought for so hard. His appointment is a threat to Roe v. Wade, which has protected women's rights to abortion access. Trump has said many times that he intended to appoint a justice who would overturn Roe v. Wade. And while being questioned in his confirmation hearing, Judge Gorsuch sidestepped all of the questions on this issue. But his views are obvious. He has questioned and argued against the legal foundation of a woman's right to choose. And he has been critical of the decisions of Roe v. Wade's decision and its reliance on the right to privacy and the substantive due process rationale. That is unacceptable. Roe v. Wade is the law of the land, and it has helped save the lives of millions of women across our country. We need to make sure that we protect that right to choose and continue to allow abortion access in this country. Now, Judge Gorsuch has also taken actions that signal his support for defunding of Planned Parenthood. Of course, we remember the doctored videos that came out in an attempt to destroy Planned Parenthood's image. Well, Utah Governor Gary Herbert attempted to defund the organization, but the 10th Circuit issued an injunction, and Gorsuch stood with the governor. He even went so far as to push for a rehearing by the full court without being asked by the governor. The court refused. Gorsuch issued then a dissenting opinion that relied on the very fallacies that the governor was pushing. We cannot afford to have this critical vote on the Supreme Court go to someone who so clearly intends to undermine women's fundamental and constitutional rights. Judge Gorsuch has also shown that he presents a threat to the LGBT community. In 2005, he wrote that people should rely on the ballot box to achieve marriage equality. And during his confirmation hearing, he was asked about cases that involve LGBT people as a class. This qualification is important because it adds heightened scrutiny. And apparently, Gorsuch was not comfortable with this because he dodged the question. And that is alarming because our LGBT community does face discrimination at extremely high rates. This is not a speculation. It is fact. Gorsuch could not even give a straight answer when Senator Dianne Feinstein asked if he agreed with Justice Scalia that there is, quote, no protection for women or gays or lesbians under the Equal Protection Law, end quote. With states around the country attempting to pass discriminatory bills, it is crucial that we have a Supreme Court justice who will apply that heightened scrutiny in discrimination cases. And finally, people living with disabilities are also fearful of this appointment and the possibility that Judge Gorsuch might be our next Supreme Court justice. In Luke P., a case involving a severely autistic student, Judge Gorsuch ruled that a state can provide an education offering minimal educational progress to students with disabilities. Rather than requiring states to fulfill their responsibilities under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Judge Gorsuch was satisfied with putting a student's learning potential at severe risk. And in the middle of his confirmation hearing, the current Supreme Court unanimously overruled his decision. What does that say about his judgment? Do we want a Supreme Court who gets it wrong on so many issues? Judge Gorsuch should not be appointed to the Supreme Court. The fact that Senate Republicans are threatening the nuclear option if Democrats filibuster his appointment is just terrifying. It would have long-lasting consequences, and it is inappropriate to select a man for this key position on the United States Supreme Court, makes decisions about so many issues that affect all Americans across our country. It is not right that they would make that on a purely partisan ideological basis. There should be a 60-vote threshold. We should make sure that they understand that if they do this and they go to the nuclear option, it will have long-lasting consequences for them in their districts, in their offices, but also for the entire country. And with that, I thank my colleague, Mr. Raskin, for yielding, and I yield back.